Hello, I'm Tuppence. I'm going to be using some UV resin again this week, and I've got minimal supplies. I'm going to use 3 colours from the chrome powder, a nail gel in black, the UV resin as I've said, this is craft UV resin, and 1 mould. And I want to make 3 different pendant designs just from these minimal supplies. Obviously I'm going to need a UV lamp to cure it, but this is the only things that I'm going to be using. So I've chosen a gold chrome powder, and instead of brushing this onto the mould, I'm going to mix this in with the UV resin. So I'm going to put a little bit into a silicone cup, just a small scoop. This stuff is pretty powerful. And then I can add the UV resin to that and mix it up. I'm going to do it this way rather than brushing the powder onto the mould, because I do want quite a concentrated colour. So if I mix this up, I can get a nice deep colour, and then I'm going to be able to blend this because I'm going to be using 3 different colours in the same mould. I've also mixed up the red and the blue, and I'm going to start with the red, and I want to put that towards the top of this skinny rectangle. Now I'm sure you can hear that my voice is really croaky and rusty. I'm not feeling great here, so I'm going to do my best to continue this voiceover, but if I lose my voice, I will have to switch to subtitles. So I'm going to start by adding a little bit of the resin in, and I'm using my microbrush stick to make sure that I spread that behind that post. And now I'm going to switch to the gold, and I'm going to put that in the middle. I didn't put very much UV resin in here. I didn't want it to fill up the mould completely. I'm going to have to do this in layers, and also I didn't want it to flow all the way down and fill up the bottom. So now I've got that little gap, I can fill that with the blue. There's quite a lot of pigment in this UV resin, and I do still need to let the light be able to get all the way through and cure it. So I'm just going to put a thin layer in. Now you can see they're not really mixing. UV resin doesn't want to flow in the same way as ordinary epoxy, so I'm just going to use my stick and kind of mix it in. I'm just pushing the gold up into the red, and then I'm going to go side to side and kind of mix that boundary, that margin. Hopefully I should get a kind of orange, and I'm going to do the same with the blue, drag the gold into the blue, and then go side to side, and hopefully that should give me some kind of a greeny margin there. Also helps to get rid of any bubbles. Okay, I'm going to put this underneath a double-sided UV lamp, and I'm going to cure this for 5 minutes. First layer is cured. I'm going to add a clear layer on the back. I just need this to be a little bit deeper, so I'm still not going to fill the mould completely up. But this is going to be the back of the piece, and it will be covered anyway. I'm just going to use my stick to spread that around, try and get rid of any bubbles, make it as neat as possible. I'm going to add a little bit more resin, and that's going underneath the lamp for 3 minutes. Time to take it out of the mould. A little extra bit there, get rid of that. Well, it's pretty, but that's not how it's going to be. I'm going to put it in this mould. All of the posts on the top of these rectangles are the same size, so you can fit this on. If you just angle it slightly and then push it down, it does fit all the way through. Just make sure it's pushed so that it comes out the top, and this will lay flat in the bottom of the mould. I'm just giving it a little bit of a wiggle. I'm going to be putting some UV resin in there in a minute, so it will be even easier to get that in. But that will look great down the middle of that. So let me take that back out. And now, whoops, I need to add some UV resin. So I'm going to put a pretty good amount, not too much, in the bottom. And now I need to spread that around. And I'm going to use a little brush. That will help me get behind that post. And I do want to actually brush the resin up the post as well. This is going to make it a little bit more slick, and it should help to get that back through the hole on the other piece. So I'll just spread that around and make sure that the bottom is covered all the way to the edges. So I've got a nice layer on there. I'm trying to get rid of any bubbles that might be in the bottom. And I'm going to prime this by adding a little bit of UV resin on the surface. That way, any bubbles that do form as soon as I push this down, hopefully they'll slide out from underneath. Even in the hole as well. So I'm just going to spread a thin layer all over the pendant. And yes, I did dip that brush into the empty mould. I'm trying to see what I'm doing through the camera. Smooth that out. There we go. And now I need to try and put it back in. Again, I'm just going to angle it slightly, make sure one edge is in, and then that will push down. And that was much easier, you can see, because I've already got the resin there and it's a bit slippery. So I'm just going to push that down, wiggle it around a little bit, and encourage the bubbles to get out from underneath. And now I've got a couple of bubbles along this edge, so I'm just going to try and chase those out. So there's a little gap at the bottom. The pendant I've just put in there is not quite as long as the cavity I've put it in, so I'm just going to use the brush to bring that resin down and encourage it to fill up the bottom as well, and make sure that all of the bubbles are gone. There's a tiny gap behind the top as well, so I'm just going to brush the resin along there. That'll make sure that the sides are nice and smooth and I'm not going to have a little dip along the top. Right, just squeezed a little bit out, so I'm going to clean that off. Make sure that's straight, and that's going to go underneath my lamp for 3 minutes. Well, despite my best efforts not to get any bubbles, I do have a bubble along this edge. So before I go any further, I want to see if I can pop it. I don't know how deep it is. I'm just going to take this metal pokey tool and try and see if the resin that's on the top is flimsy enough for me to pop. So I'm just going to poke it and try gently to do that. I don't want to push this too hard in case I go through the mould, but it's definitely deeper than I thought. So I'm going to take this electric drill and I'm going to try and drill that resin away on the top just to open up the bubble so that I can fill that up, and then hopefully I can get rid of the bubble entirely. Right, I think that is all opened out. I've got rid of all the resin on the top. Now I just need to get rid of the dust. Okay, now that I've opened that up, I should be able to put the resin on top that will fill in that hole, and it's not even going to be noticeable. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit on there. Now, as you can see, it's just beaded up and it hasn't actually gone all the way into the hole. So I'm going to try and encourage that to get into that hole and chase any bubbles that might be in there out. I'm using my microbrush stick. But actually, I think it might be easier if I use the brush. Now, where did I put that? There we go. So that's pretty flexible. It's very thin. I can get right in and chase out the bubble. And then I can smooth that out. Make sure I haven't got any more bubbles on the surface. Then I'm going to put this under the lamp and cure it for a couple of minutes. Okay, that's cured. I'm going to put a backing on this now, and I want that to be black. So I've got some black UV nail gel, and I'm going to use that to tint my resin. So I'm just going to put some in the bottom of this silicone cup, spread that out a little bit, and then I can mix that in with my UV resin. That's going to give me a really nice black that's going to cure pretty well. So I'm just going to use my silicone spatula. Mix that together. Make sure I scrape all the bottom of the cup and get that mixed in. That's a really nice black. So I'm going to need probably a bit more than that. So I'm going to add some more UV resin. I'm going to be putting a few layers on. There's a decent amount to cover up. So it doesn't have to be solid black. It should still be able to allow the light to pass through. That's a little bit bubbly where I've mixed it up, and I've just worked hard to get rid of bubbles. So I'm going to quickly torch it, and that should get rid of the surface bubbles at least. I'm just going to wait for a minute to see if any more bubbles pop up. That's looking okay, so now I can add this onto the back. I'm going to fill up the side first. Try and bring that up level. The pendant that I've put in there is still below the level of the mould, so I will be able to cover it up on the back. I just want to fill up the sides first. Okay, and then I can take my stick and again try and smooth this out and weed out any bubbles that might want to cling. I've still got a little room and I am using a double-sided lamp, so I'm going to top this up a little bit more. Okay, now that section at the bottom, I do need to use my brush to help smooth that resin across. So I'm just going to gently smooth this across. I'm not pulling the mould away though, because that would disturb the resin that was already in there, the cured layer below, and that would cause the black to run underneath. So I'm just gently going around getting rid of the bubbles, and this is going to go underneath my lamp. So I'm going to cure that for 5 minutes. I mixed up a little more black resin and then added that so that it covered the entire back. I gave it a quick torch to get rid of any bubbles and put it to cure for 5 minutes. Alright, time to take this out of the mould so I can see what I've got. Little bits to clean up. What on earth? Now I've got 2 enormous bubbles in there, and you saw I did everything I could to try and eliminate bubbles. So resin certainly does have its little games. I don't really know how deep they are, but I'm going to have to deal with them, and I'll deal with them in exactly the same way as I did before. So I've drilled open the holes and now I've got to get rid of the dust. I should probably wipe this off with a cloth, but I think this will be fine. Right, I'm going to put this on top of my mould, and then I can give this another quick coat of UV resin and fill in those holes. And as my mould was slightly matte anyway, because it's an old mould, I would have top coated this, so it's really not adding that much more work. So I'm just going to squirt the resin into the hole. I want to fill that first and make sure that there is no bubbles in there, especially as I've done everything I can to make sure I get rid of them. So you can already see it is pretty much disappearing. I'm just going to get that brush in there and make sure that there are no bubbles that are hiding underneath. I have gone in at a slight angle. It's always best if you can to actually drill this out so that there is no overhang of resin on top, but sometimes that's not always possible. Okay, just fill this one as well. Get that brush in and it should disappear once I get the resin in there. Once the holes are filled up and are no longer visible, I just need to add a little bit more resin on the top, and I'm going to use my brush to smooth that out across the whole surface. It's going to make it look nice and shiny and slightly round the edges. Then I'm going to pop this underneath my lamp and I'm going to cure this for 5 minutes, and that should cure the resin that is deep in the holes. Once that front is all cured, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to coat the back with a layer of black UV resin. This will neaten up the back, hide that centre panel and round the corners out so that it isn't quite so sharp. Once I've got this covered in the UV resin, I'm going to give it a quick blast with the torch, pop any bubbles, and I'll cure it for 5 minutes. Okay, the back looks nice, and so does the front. I've got rid of most of those bubbles and it looks pretty good. I really like this design. Let's do another one. This time I'm going to start by filling up this small circle. It doesn't have a post in it. I'm using the clear UV resin, and I'm going to put this underneath the light to cure for 3 minutes. Now I can pop that out of the mould, and this is going to give me a lovely clear circle with a flat bottom. I'm going to be placing that in this mould, and then I'm putting colour all the way around that. So I'm going to want that to be firmly attached to the bottom of the mould. I'm going to squirt a little blob of resin into this next square or rectangle, and then I can drop that disc on top. Just going to pick up the resin, let it get coated. I'm going to stamp some of it off, and then I'm just going to drop this in place. So I don't want to move that. That was a pretty good shot. I'm going to leave it to sit there just for a couple of seconds and let that resin settle underneath it, and then I'm going to cure it in place with my torch. I held that for about 30 seconds or so, and that has set the resin enough so that when I put the colours around this, it should not seep underneath, and that is going to stay completely clear where that circle is. I'm putting black at the bottom. I'm just going to use up what I've got left from the previous make. I think I might need a little bit more. Try and be careful, I don't want to get any on top of the disc. Okay. I'm going to use the stick and smooth that out. Now I'm going to add some of the gold. I'm going to put that directly above the black. And just let that settle. And then the red. I'm only going to use 3 colours in this one, I think. So that is going to go on the top. And then I can make sure that this goes behind the post and it evens out. I'll bring that down towards the gold. I don't really want to mix or blend the colours any more than this, though. I do want them to keep their separate lines. Alright, just give this a quick torch to pop some of the bubbles. And then I can pop this underneath my lamp. I'm going to cure this for 5 minutes. I'm going to add a clear second layer, and this is going to bring it up to the level of the disc in the middle, which will be slightly lower than the mould itself. I'm going to spread that out, make sure that it is even all the way across the surface. And there are a few bubbles in there, so I'm going to use my torch and apply a little bit of heat to pop the bubbles. And then I can pop this underneath my lamp. Because it's a clear layer, I'm going to cure that for 3 minutes. This is ready to take out of the mould now. And you can see that the edges are looking a little bit ragged. They're raised up. That's because the mould wasn't filled up and the surface tension pulls the resin up along the side of the mould. And when it sets, you end up with it looking slightly dipped in the middle. I'm just going to take those off by using a nail file, can use sandpaper, and just sand this until everything is nice and smooth. So I'm going to go around all of the edges. It's mostly the corners that tend to raise up more than anything. And then I can pop this onto my mould because I am going to cover the whole back of this with a layer of clear resin. So I'm just going to put some on, enough to cover the whole piece. And then I'll use my stick to spread that out to all of the edges. Just want to make sure I don't cover up the hole where the fixing is going to be. And because I'm putting a clear layer on, this should only take about 3 minutes underneath the UV lamp. So I'm just going to make sure that that is all spread out and it's nice and even. Okay, that's all covered. There are a few bubbles in there, so I'm going to pop that with my torch. Just apply a little bit of heat, and that's going to cure for 3 minutes. The mould is well used, so you can see that although this is shiny, it isn't quite as glossy as it could be. I'm going to coat the front as well. So I'll put a blob of resin there, and I'm going to use my finger to spread that out across the whole surface. This is the quickest and easiest way to do it, but I am avoiding that hole at the top because I don't want to cover that. That's fine. Now I'm just going to take the brush and finesse it so I can get closer to that hole in the middle. There are quite a lot of bubbles. I'm going to give it a quick blast from the torch. Just need to fill in a little gap down the side and up around the hole. Take it all the way to the edge. If you crouch down, you can see by the light that reflects in it whether you've missed any areas. Once that's covered, that's going under the lamp to cure. I'm going to keep to the same mould shape as I've been using, and I'm just going to place random dots. Try and vary the size. I'm using my microbrush stick to drop a little bit of resin into the bottom of the mould, and I'm just going to fill up the bottom part with the blue, and I can change colours as I go up the mould. So you can see I'm getting different size dots. I don't want to put them too close together because they will just merge into one blob. So depending on how much resin I pick up, I'm getting different sizes. Now you can see that that first blob that I put in there, that was just too close to the corner and it's all merged in, so it's not really a dot. I'm going to cure that, so I'm just using my torch to set that. It won't take very long, just about 30 seconds or so. It doesn't matter if any of the other ones get cured, that's fine. Now that it's set, I can prise it loose with the tweezers and just try and grab hold of it. Don't really do very well with tweezers, but there we go. That's all removed, and that gives me a fresh area to start again. So I'm just going to add another dot. Try and make it a little smaller and keep it away from that corner. And in fact, I'm going to cure this straight away so that that doesn't spread and do the same thing as it did before. Now I just need to continue adding the blue, and then I'll do the same with the gold and the red. And I think I've done enough talking for a little while, so I'm going to speed this up and put on a little bit of music. This is cured, so I can get it out the mould and have a look, see what that pattern looks like. Oh, that's really nice. I love that. I only put 2 layers of black resin in here, so I need to sand down the corners so that I can add 1 more layer to flatten the back. I'm not really keen on how thick these pendants are in the mould, so I have made this one slightly thinner. So I'm just going to sand off those edges, especially the corners, and get rid of the dust. I'm going to add a layer of clear resin onto the back to round it out and level it. I'll use a brush to spread this out to the corners and the edges, and because it's clear resin, I'm going to cure this for 3 minutes. Before I add a layer of clear resin on the front, I'm going to put a dot of clear resin onto each of the coloured dots. Call me crazy, but this is going to take some time. I might have to cure them individually as I go along just to stop them from spreading. Because they're already cured, if I make any mistakes, I can remove it with a silicone tool, reapply the resin, and then carry on. Once all the dots are cured, I'm using a brush to apply a thin layer of resin over the whole surface. That way everything will be shiny, but I'll still have the texture from the dots. I'm going to put this underneath my lamp and cure it for 5 minutes for a final cure. All that's left to do is to add something at the top so that you can hang it, and I have these. They are called pinch bales. They come in lots of different designs and patterns, and they work like this. You just pull them apart, then you insert the little prongs into the front and the back of the hole and pinch it together, hence the name pinch bale. And then you'll be able to hang that from a necklace or a key ring or something. However, I only have silver ones, and because I've got gold in my design, I'd prefer to use gold on the top, so I'm going to make my own. I've already made one here, and it works on exactly the same principle. This is flat bezel wire that I have in gold, and I'm just going to take a measurement from my knuckle to the edge of my nail on my thumb. That way I can roughly make sure that they all look the same. I'm going to snip that. And then I've got a pair of pliers. They are flat edged, but they've got a round, they're round on the back. So I'm just going to take the very end of the pliers and hold the middle, and then I can just bend the wire down. So I've basically folded it in half, and it's slightly rounded on the top. Then I'm going to grab the very end of one of those legs, I'm lining up the edge of the wire to the edge of the pliers, and then I'm going to bend that round. So this will fold that prong into the middle, and that's going to be one of the legs that goes through the holes. I'm just going to do the same on the other one, and I'm going to fold that into the middle as well. And that is going to be my pinch veil. So this is going to work in exactly the same way. I just need to stick those little prongs in. I might need to just open this a bit. Stick the prong in the back and the front, and then I can pinch that together. I'm going to thread a necklace through this one. You could also use a key ring. I would have preferred this to be gold, but it will do for this demonstration. These are really pretty. I love the chrome powders in them. I'm going to do the same for that one, but that's it. I've got my 3 designs using 1 mould and 4 colours, although I really only used 3 in that one. I love these. I hope that you love these. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, comment, share, hype if you can, and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help my channel, and you'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time. Hopefully my voice will be better by then. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.